We'll get started in just a minute, just making sure we've got everyone online as a part of the meeting as well. So just a few more minutes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the first meeting of the Domestic Violence Criminal Justice Response and Enhancement Advisory Council to order. I'd like to thank everyone for being here this afternoon for this newly convened group. I'm really grateful to everyone who's present here today and the work that it took to get this first meeting off the ground. So welcome, everyone. And I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm going to introduce myself first and then start to the left and then go to the right. So my name is May Flexer. I'm a state senator from the 29th district. I represent the towns of Thompson, Putnam, Killingly, Brooklyn, Pomfret, Canterbury, Scotland, Windham, and Mansfield. And I have been privileged to serve in the legislature for a number of years working on issues around domestic violence. And I am the former co-chair of the Domestic Violence Model Policy Governing Council for Law Enforcement. So with that, I will turn the microphone over to Megan Scanlon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Megan Scanlon. I'm the president and CEO of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Really happy to be joining everybody. And this is obviously the brainchild. I do want to give a special shout out to Geraldine Wild, who's here in the audience, Dan Cargill and Joe DeTuno, as well as Liza Andrews for all their hard work, and Kirsten Briner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Karen Foley O'Connor, CEO of the Network Against Domestic Abuse, serving survivors in North Central Connecticut, also retired Connecticut State Police Sergeant and post-certified law enforcement domestic violence instructor.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Tyler, and I am an attorney in private practice. I'm also a survivor of domestic violence, have worked with a lot of the wonderful people on this group before, was a board member on CCADV after my own experience, and eternally grateful for all of what you all have done.
Good afternoon, Gail Hardy, designee for the Chief State's Attorney, and I'm an executive assistant at the Chief State's Attorney's Office.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Talca, Office of Policy Management, designee of the Secretary of OPM, Jeff Beckham. I'm Undersecretary of Criminal Justice Policy and Planning, and I'd be remiss if I didn't show my appreciation for all the hard work that went into enactment of this public act. It's there's so many critical areas of work going on with the bodies that were consolidated into this council, and it's exciting that we can leverage the expertise around this table here to help to increase supports and services for survivors and victims. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Eulalia Garcia, designee for Commissioner Angel Quiros with the Department of Correction. And my role with the agency is District Administrator for District 2 and Director of Programs. And I am honored and really looking forward to the great work that this council will do.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea O'Connor. I am the Family Violence Victim Advocate Program Manager at the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence Services. So I supervise all the court-based victim advocacy at our program. We cover the Greater New Haven and Valley areas. So that is New Haven Court, Derby Court, and Milford Court. And I'm very excited to be here.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Ryan Maynard, Connecticut State Police. I'm the commanding officer of the State Police Training Academy. Unfortunately, we couldn't have Trooper First Class Daniel Richmond here today. He does have a work obligation. However, he will be attending in the future. He is an instructor assigned to the Training Academy and currently assigned also our criminal investigation and domestic violence program.
State Senator John Kissel of the 7th District, serving folks, 100,000 folks up in North Central Connecticut, Enfield, Somers, Suffield, Windsor, Locks, East Granby, and Ellington. And I'm here by virtue of the fact that working on legislation in particular with Senator Flexer is a passion of mine, ranking senator on the Judiciary Committee for decades now. And I'm very proud of the fact that I believe state of Connecticut is one of the leading states in our nation in combating not only domestic violence, but showing support services and approaching it in a very logical and thoughtful manner from every direction. So happy and delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Dole. I'm a Superior Court judge assigned to the Criminal Division. I'm sitting as a designee of our Chief Court Administrator, Elizabeth Bizzuto, and I'm honored to be in part of this commission and whatever I can do to help.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe DeTuno. I'm a director within the Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division. I oversee family services, and I similarly have been selected by our Chief Court Administrator, Judge Bizzuto.
Good afternoon, all. My name is CJ Forcier. I'm the Regional Manager for Connecticut Judicial Department, Family Services. Again, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mary Kazicki, Director with the Office of Victim Services with the Connecticut Judicial Branch. Very pleased to be here and be part of these and very important conversations.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Alaric Fox. I have the great pleasure of serving as the Chief of Police in Enfield. I'm the representative of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association. It's been about 5.5 years in Enfield, and prior to that, I spent 24 years with the state police, retiring as the Colonel of the State Police in 2018.
Good afternoon. I'm Johanna Canning. I am a public defender with the Hartford Judicial District, and I'm here as a designee for Tashawn Lewis Bowden Lewis, and I'm happy to be here and work with you all.
Good afternoon. My name is William Anselmo. I'm a co-director of Community Resources for Justice, Family Reentry. We do domestic violence intervention programs for the Judicial Department and the Corrections Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for those introductions, and so glad that you're all here at this table to do the important work we're going to be engaged in, not only over the next several weeks and months, but over the years ahead. Thank you all very much for your commitment to this. The next item on our agenda is the selection of two chairpersons. As this council was created through statute this year, it does detail that there shall be two chairpersons of this council, and I will recognize Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Senator Flexer, and it's my tremendous honor at this time to nominate yourself, Senator May Flexer, as well as CEO of the CCADV, Megan Scanlon, to be co-chairs of this council.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other nominations? Is there a second for this set of nominations?
Second.
Seconded by Judge Doyle. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of myself and Megan Scanlon as the two chairpersons of this council, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you, Senator Kissel, for the nomination, and thank you all for your support. Moving on, item number 4 on our agenda is an overview of Public Act 23-136. You have that in your packet, so I won't read it in great detail. But I would say that generally, I think this council moving forward is charged with a number of very important things to be evaluating and reviewing for future policy and potential statutory changes. I think of it as a blending of a couple of different groups, the work of the group that I mentioned earlier, the Law Enforcement Model Policy Governing Council, making sure that that work moves forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the former co-chair of that group that's now melded into this, Dan Cargill, and all of his great work over the last couple of years. I know this group will move forward. I think that was a body that worked really well and collaboratively with law enforcement over the course of a decade to ensure that we had strong model policies that were used by all of our law enforcement agencies across the state. And so that's an important charge that we will continue to have moving forward. In addition to looking at data that is collected by law enforcement agencies, reviewing the offender programs that exist and how they're working and how they may need to be updated, pretrial family violence education programs as well, an evaluation of existing domestic violence dockets, how they're functioning, how they may or may not need to be expanded. Similarly, the use of electronic monitoring and how that's working in our state and how that may or may not need to be expanded. Risk assessments that are used in family violence cases, arrests and prosecution and penalties, and the monitoring of violations of orders of protection, the process for reviewing arrest warrants, compliance with firearm seizure and surrender in family violence cases, programming that's offered to individuals who are currently in the custody of the Department of Corrections for family violence offenses, and training for various criminal justice stakeholders who work throughout the system, many of whom are represented by the body that is this council. So with that, is there any discussion or questions about the charge of this council? As you can see, it's a very broad scope of work. And so I'll move on to item number 5, given that there doesn't appear to be any discussion of the call itself. Item number 5 will be to review and discuss the initial areas of focus. And I will turn the microphone over to my newly elected co-chair, Megan Scanlon.
Thank you, Senator Flexer. Okay, so I think Senator Flexer did a really good job of explaining the overview. And the reason that we're here with our initial meeting is that's a lot, obviously, to do. And we're not expecting to do all of that within like the first year of the council. But we do want to open up the discussion now and figure out if there's ways that we can prioritize several issues that we think we might want to look at most immediately, and start that work over this year to be able to bring any suggestions or policy suggestions to the legislature in the future. So I would open it up to all of the talent and colleagues on this council. And Senator Kissel, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman Scanlon. Actually, this is more of a setup and a deferral to folks that are on this council that represent law enforcement. I think we're all aware that going to a domestic violence or domestic dispute call is extremely dangerous. And unfortunately, in recent months and years, we've just seen law enforcement ambushed, and it's with horrific consequences, deaths. But these are often, even if there's no violence, very dangerous situations. So I'm just deferring to law enforcement. What can Connecticut do, or what should we maybe be about as far as, and quite often we've striven to make sure that no more dual arrests, and making sure that there's a very good, precise enactment when you go to the scene as far as the participants or the victims or the children. But also perhaps we should revisit how we train or the support services we have for law enforcement. I just think that's something that's top of mind with myself and my constituents. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. I don't know if Lieutenant Maynard, did you have anything that you wanted to contribute to that?
I think so from the law enforcement side, we are continuously working with the outside agencies as well as continuing to review what our processes are and what we have. We have also worked with the CCADV as far as looking at what the LAP has, looking at what we can do to move forward. We have other people inside of our training academy evaluating that and then seeing, is it a training piece? Is there an experience piece on the outside? So some of it, as things continuously move forward beyond the training, right? So sustainment training, more of like an in-service. I think across the state, we're meeting a lot of things at a basic level and then looking as we face attrition rates systemically, like throughout the entire law enforcement community, we lose some of that experience. And that's one of the issues that we've been evaluating even from our end as well, is we lose some of that frame of reference relative to operational experience, not just from an initial training. So it is being reviewed from our end.
Any other topics? I'm looking at you, Joe DeTuno. I think you might have some.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that probably the place respectfully we should start is there have been subcommittees and committees like Center Flexors, Model Policy. Jerry Wild and I and Megan are co-chairs of the DV standards, and to maybe just provide an overview of those two subcommittees and the work that's been done. I know there's been a lot of work in our subcommittee. That might be a good place to start, is to kind of get grounded in what work has been done as we combined some of the larger work that we've been doing. So that might be a good place to start with presentations, or however the chairs think it's best to get that information to the group.
Yeah, I think having those two as subcommittees and for the next meeting, be able to present on those would be great. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Joe. Any other suggestions on topics that individuals would want to explore in subcommittee? Senator Kissel.
Yeah, I'm sorry, not trying to hog the mic or anything like that. As Senator Flexer is the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and I as a ranking member, I can say that between, as soon as Thanksgiving hits, the holidays rush forward. And even though we're going to be going into a short session that starts in February, I think that if this council has intentions of presenting any proposed legislation, the sooner the better. So I think that the presentations are spot on. That's a brilliant idea to get us grounded. But if there's things that we contemplate moving forward on, I think my co-chairs of the Judiciary Committee, the sooner that we get that intention to them, the better. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Karen O'Connor.
Just to echo what Joe said, I think that we'd be remiss to not talk about all the hard work that the governing council did on the model policy for law enforcement. And I will say that law enforcement has stepped up and uses that document as a guide. And I think that there's members of this committee that are unfamiliar with that we might be able to provide that, so they're aware of how far we've come with that.
Thank you. Anybody? Yeah.
To that. That's a really good point, Karen. And I think everyone at this table should know it will be the charge of this body to continue to make those updates as we move forward, as we're blending these two different bodies. That will be one thing, that will be one piece of work that will continue here at this table.
And I think to just clarify on that, so I do think that two of the subcommittees that will come out of this is the DV Offender Standards Council, just so everybody's on the same page, and the Model Policy subcommittee. I do think there's opportunity to explore maybe one or two other subcommittees as we look at what we're charged with. I know we at CCADV have talked about firearm seizure and the process around firearm seizure and orders of protection. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or ideas around that, but that's something that I know we are interested in looking at. Mark Talca.
I appreciate Mark again from OPM, and I was agree with the question and just ask, obviously it's clear that this advisory council kind of containing the merging of existing boards and commissions is highly effective. It allows us to focus. Are there other goals that compel the legislation that we should be aware of heading into it? Obviously, efficiencies are clear, but are there other things that we should that you're seeking that we could kind of set as priorities right out of the gate?
I think one of the big goals of this was to decrease the silos, and certainly if Jerry or Joe want to jump into, because they worked really hard on this, but we really do want to decrease the silos across these two different subcommittees, or different committees that we then just blended into one. So the goal is that everybody's around the table, that we're all talking about some of these harder issues. I know some of the big ones for CCADV that even Senator Flexer mentioned from what's in the legislation. Certainly DV dockets, we, Dan and I were at a presentation on Monday where, 45, it was shared that 45% of the criminal docket is domestic violence related. That's taking out criminal motor vehicle from that. So I do think that is a big issue. I don't know that we're going to solve that in a short session, Senator Kissel, but certainly something worth establishing a subcommittee on, at least in my opinion. And I don't know if others have other opinions around that.
And I think one of the major obstacles of a lot of moving forward with this work is that everyone did remain in a silo, and information exchange, national best practice. Senator Kissel, as you're saying, Connecticut is a leader in a lot of the things that we're doing when we bring national experts into Connecticut. So to have a conversation with all the data, with national best practice, and then make recommendations across systems, I think that's probably the most effective way of doing it, rather than kind of the way we did it, which was everyone had ideas and then we were competing in a way with each other in terms of getting those things done. So if we can all pull in the same direction, I think we'll do a lot of good work. The only other thing I have is that number 6, electronic monitoring. Obviously, last legislative session was Public Act 106, and we'll be able to provide some information about how that expansion is going and what our plans are as part of the judicial branch.
That's great to hear. And thank you for sharing that information. Joe, maybe that's something we can look at either. I mean, do folks think that electronic monitoring and DV docket should be in a similar subcommittee or in two different ones? And I'll just as people think about that, I'll just expand and say, sometimes policies are adopted in legislation and there may not be the full picture as it comes to data as we might want. And so that's a part of the goal of this group, as you just said pretty clearly, that we want to make sure that we're as informed as possible and people aren't making decisions in silos or making decisions without all of the information that is actually out there, but just aren't getting to the right people because no one is asking for it. So as we think about whether those are two things that should be looked at together, I do think there's some overlap, correct me if I'm wrong, between where there are DV dockets and where electronic monitoring is currently in place. All right, well, I was going to ask Joe real quick if that's okay, and then I'll call on you.
I mean, I think that the expansion of GPS is already in motion. We have 3 courts that are going to be going live by Thanksgiving or shortly after Thanksgiving. DV dockets is such a different kind of major discussion because it talks about best practice, it talks about resources and those things. And I think to separate the two might make sense since it's already been legislative mandated that we go that way. So DV dockets, I think, is going to be an important conversation for a lot of people at the table because a lot of players are going to be in the same discussion about how we implement that, but GPS is moving along. So I think that the idea might be how is it going and is it being successfully implemented? That's probably the thing that we would want to talk about as a body, because there's law enforcement in the program that we're moving forward. Law enforcement's a huge part of that, as well as the court, victim advocates, public defenders, state's attorneys. So
thank you.
Senator. Oh, you're good. Okay. Okay. So I have those would be two separate. I did sort of want to talk about data because it's come up a couple times, and really decide as a body how we want to approach that. I think there's probably 2 different ways we could. There could be a subcommittee on data, or it could just be a standing agenda item that we have on the full council agenda in which we are able to share data, and maybe, maybe one session it's, Mark sharing data from the lens of OPM. Maybe the next session it's, having family reentry and others, or Chief State's Attorney's Office share data. But I do think kind of getting that data sharing piece is important to what Joe just spoke about. So I'm just curious as to what others think. I have my opinion that I think it should just be on the agenda for the full council. But if there's ways in which you think it could be more effective in a subcommittee, I'm certainly open to that discussion.
I'm serve on a variety of boards and commissions, and on some of them, there is a specific data subcommittee that drives the work. So that's an option if the chairs and council feel that it should stand alone. I would offer for consideration, perhaps setting a priority or an expectation that data is cross-cutting and it will be found in all of the work. So maybe for the presentations that come before, we create a goal that there be substantial emphasis on data where possible. I was really impressed when the meeting started that we have stakeholders from across the criminal justice system on the council. So I began to wonder if there could be subcommittees organized around the parts of the system that we're looking, perhaps court operations, maybe offender programs and supervision, law enforcement, victim services, and maybe that would help to guide the members of the council who are deciding where they can best allocate their time. It could be driven according to their area of expertise, and then within those we could place these items. But I say that not knowing what the current structure is for the other bodies, but that struck me.
Thank you. Anybody else? This is open discussion. We get to form that. This is the first meeting. Senator Kissel.
Well, and again, sorry for blabbing away, but one of the things that I thought was great about breaking down the silos, and I think that the original proposal came from you, Chairman Scanlon, was that with the larger group, we're going to be able to meld so much easier and have a coherent policy. So when it comes to data, I think that's one of the things that when we're looked at as a national leader, we're data driven. We like to see results from our policies. And if we, sometimes as legislators, and I'll only speak for myself, we're sort of theoreticians, so that, it sounds good and we debate it in the committee level and the floors of the chambers, but then in practice, maybe it's less than, or there's glitches that we never anticipated. I'm wondering, as some group that we can look to, and maybe Undersecretary Pelka serves on it as well. I think probably a lot of us do as well. The JJPOC, Juvenile Justice Policy and Oversight Council or Committee. How I know that they're affiliated with the University of New Haven, but I'm just wondering how they handle, because they're data driven as well. So I'm wondering if we can look to them, if not to replicate what they do, to get guidance from how they do it, so that maybe we can do it in a similar fashion, because it seems to be pretty successful as far as gathering the data and then disseminating it so that policy is effectuated by what that data tells us.
Thank you. Mark Pelka.
I'd be happy to elaborate on the JJPOC, on the designee serves as co-chair of that group with Representative Walker, and Senator Kissel is exactly right. The Tau Youth Justice Institute at the University of New Haven provides administrative support by their presence at a university. They also leverage academic capacity, and there are resources that are used to contract with third-party researchers. And that's similar to the Sentencing Commission. That is located at the University of Connecticut Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy, where they're able to leverage university faculty and students, interns for the work. So Senator Kissel is spot on about seeing these reports and analyses come out. And in fact, the legislature applied a similar model with the recent commissions looking at youth mental health and broader behavioral health needs. The Tau Youth Justice Institute is the TA provider as well. So that helps with covering just the sustaining of the work in between meetings with assisting the presenters on preparing materials with identifying federal or private grants or state or local grants that could help to enhance the data picture that's painted. So I think, we need to find the right model for this council, but I think there is benefit to finding technical assistance delivery, administrative support if needed, identifying some of the more complex questions that will come before our council where we will want to leverage more intensive research and data analysis to support the work. And I'd be more than happy to contribute to identifying providers who could help with that, or looking at strategies, or directly assisting where possible. Because I've been very impressed with the data analysis that has come out of CCADV. A couple examples is the lethality assessment program. I benefited from Dan Cargill's presentation on it. I will see the same presentation twice because there's so much detail in there. And also the dual arrest. That was a model policy that people in this room, a senator and 2 senators, helped to enact, led the enactment of. And CCADV was able to produce dual arrest statistics by town. So maybe we, when we come across a data question, we see if there's existing capacity to leverage to do that. And where not, we identify where we can find solutions. The final thought is that the fact that I think we're, in the legislative office building, we're televised, we have a very impressive roster of members. I think it'll be more appealing, given the consolidation we've attained, to academic institutions, research groups to want to work with us because of the driving force that we can provide around DV.
Thank you. And I will say, I mean, we, working on this legislation, obviously we do have really great talent and, support. CCADV is obviously committed to filling in the administrative support and the technical assistance and research as much as we can. But your point is well taken that there are other opportunities to partner with other institutions that we can take a look at. All right. Any other suggestions on subcommittee areas of focus? Senator Kissel.
I actually have a question for you, Madam Co-Chair. As the CEO, you folks are just intimately tied in with what's going on with domestic violence issues right now. And so you're the fount of wisdom that I would look to. So I have my ideas, having sat on judiciary and being a legislator and working with the excellent folks that we have up in Enfield and North Central Connecticut. But that being the case, you just have a breadth of knowledge I can't even approach. And so I'm just wondering, we know we have docket issues, maybe we have, monitoring issues, but I'm just wondering what else. I mean, should we have a separate subcommittee on substance abuse? Is that a preeminent theme in domestic violence issues? I just don't know. I haven't done the research regarding that, but I'm guessing that you might be able to give us some guidance regarding some of those things that we can break out and work on a subcommittee level.
Well, so obviously, it's a substance use is obviously a big issue when it comes to the individuals that we're serving across the state. I guess what I would say is that the subcommittees that we're talking about today don't necessarily have to be the subcommittees that we talk about in the future, right? I think the goal is to identify some immediate areas that we want to focus on, work on those issues, hopefully get to a place where we have enacted either better administrative changes or legislative changes, and then be able to take a look at, okay, what are some of the next issues that we'd like to do. So to me, it's ever evolving. So this is the opportunity to sort of talk about, well, what are the immediate issue areas that we think we would want to tackle that also are realistic for the council to be able to start with. I know I had mentioned earlier the firearm seizure issue as it relates to protective orders. I do think that's a manageable one to be able to look at and to be able to really provide the legislature with suggestions. And it may not even be legislative. It could simply be administrative changes across some of the different systems that we have at the table. So I do want to be clear that and it was a good point, Senator Kissel, to clarify that these are not like set in stone and we don't have to keep the same subcommittees. Although I will say DV dockets is probably going to be a bigger issue that's going to take a lot longer to come up with a best practice and recommendation for the state of Connecticut. Yes.
I appreciate the fact, Madam Chair, that this is an iterative process and that these subcommittees are going to change over time depending on what's important for that particular moment. But I just want to just tag along with what Undersecretary Pelka said. I appreciate the fact that we've got a lot of knowledge right here and we're bringing it all together sort of under one tent, and so that we don't have silos and that kind of breakdown. When it comes to the data, I know that you sort of said that institutions or institutes of higher education might be attracted to help us gather data. I don't know what the process is with the juvenile justice. I don't know if I guess just to get down to brass tacks, do we need a budget? Do we have a budget? Do we need to hire people? Are we able to hire people? Is one of the things that next time I bump into Senator Austin, should I say we might be looking for something at the next budget change? I'm just wondering how that works, because I don't see behind that curtain as far as how that JJPOC operates financially. And I just don't know, do we have the legs to gather the data? Do we just have to sort of try to get people to volunteer initially and then maybe build on that? I just want to know the practicalities.
I think that directed to you,
No,
Mark.
So I think that one thing that committee, and forgive me if I'm returning that committee so often, I say there is a strategic plan that is developed, and that contains the priorities for a 3-year period. Included in those priorities are data-driven goals, which may include reduction in recidivism, for example, for the juvenile population, or addressing racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system. I think that could be helpful because it sets what goals or priorities this advisory council may want to create. Then it seeks the means of achieving those goals, which could include receiving stakeholder presentations on how law enforcement are utilizing lethality assessment program, or comparing our DV offender program standards against national models. It also could include the goals that I've heard the co-chair mention, which is exploring implementation of firearm seizure policy. And I think it'd be helpful for us to have a goal or priority in mind. And that would be something that would operate at our full advisory council level. And we would identify what are the barriers we have to knowing, for example, how firearm seizure is being implemented for people with family violence charges, or how are the DV dockets performing when in the courts where they do exist, and where is there a need. And then I think once we once we gather that information and set our goals, we can get to Senator Kissel's very direct question, why I think his presence is so helpful here, because he gets down to brass tacks. We can then determine, is there existing capacity within available resources to carry out that analysis, or do we need to put a budget request in? Do we need to seek out private foundation or federal grants or anything of that nature? But I think that would perhaps head us toward the goals that we want to see.
Thank you. It is.
So
Karen,
perhaps we
O'Connor.
need a strategic plan committee.
Sounds like it. So we'll okay. So right now, just to summarize, I have DV offender standards law, model policy subcommittee. It sounds like strategic plan subcommittee to start. I know other areas that we've talked about: electronic monitoring, DV dockets, firearm seizure. I think data is still a question mark as to whether or not it should be in a subcommittee or full agenda item. But maybe that's something the strategic plan committee can work on as well. Anything else? Any other contributions? Joe, did you know?
One of the things I've noticed going through the list is that there's some things that are directly related to court, and maybe a subcommittee that is about the court, and then we might be able to, we might not be able to tackle all of those things, but if if the court subcommittee can look at the things that are connected, we can then prioritize maybe the top 2 or 3 with the committee's approval to kind of work on. And then there might be things next session or that we could continue to work on. There's a lot of things that are really court specific, and it might be better to have a court-based subcommittee.
I think somebody mentioned court ops before. Are you, is that similar or?
It's just court. There's a lot of different, CSSD, court ops, judges, prosecutors. I mean, I think there's a lot of membership contribution. to that.
Okay. So just court.
Megan.
Senator Flexer.
Just to clarify, so in that court subcommittee, are you suggesting that it be charged with looking at the dockets and maybe with the electronic monitoring too? Like
Well-
anything in this charge that's related to courts?
I think DB dockets are probably separate because it's it would probably be the whole subcommittee, but there's some
Okay.
things within the risk assessments, electronic monitoring, arrest warrants, maybe even the firearm seizure. There's just some things in here, FVP as an example. There's some things that
Yep.
could be kind of put into one bigger subcommittee, and then we
Yep.
could say which ones are easy to tackle and which ones are going to be difficult. So,
So everything but dockets, how's that?
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so court. Court subcommittee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other suggestions on areas of focus? I just want to be mindful of the time. Oh, Karen O'Connor. I'm sorry.
I was just going to comment that, Mark had mentioned that each committee being in charge of their own data. And we're here to kind of remove the silos, but the data exists within the silos.
Yeah.
You've got the the desk family violence report that comes out every year. I've got data regarding victims. Dan has data regarding LAP. The court has data, and we're all, and that data are contained in silos. So I think that if we task those subcommittees, those people that are on those groups that can access that data to kind of report back to the group.
Yeah.
So we're coming together.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And so that would then sort of lend itself to just having it be a standing agenda item for the full council.
But being a charge.
But being a charge of every subcommittee, but then having that be a priority of the entire council. So thank you very much. That's really helpful. Any other discussion on areas of focus? Okay, all right. If not, I do want to just moving on to the next agenda item, review and discuss subcommittee structure. So we CCDV are absolutely willing to provide the administrative support to the subcommittees. So you'll have at least one of our staff member between myself, Liza, Jerry, Dan, and others that will help to maintain all the administrative support for the subcommittees. We are working with LCO on the reporting structures and requirements. So that is still to be determined. And what I mean by that is we are not clear on if it needs to be televised or simply just have written minutes. So that is something that we are trying to clarify in terms of the structure for the subcommittees. But then there is the discussion around, how folks want to join the subcommittees. So I think what we have thought we would do is finalize the subcommittee structure, finalize the subcommittee list from what we just talked about, send it out to the group and have individuals respond with where they think they want to use their time. And then from there, we'd be able to identify, those individuals that would chair each subcommittee. Does that sound like an okay plan for everybody? Okay. All right, great. And we will, I think, as we get that information out, we'll have the information around the reporting structures and requirements. And we'll be able to help facilitate, we meaning CCADV staff will be able to help facilitate any kind of questions or agenda issues that you may have for those subcommittees. So we'll make sure we handle that as well. Any questions or discussion around the structure? Mark.
As I think the CCADV and the chairs and the members will do the proper sorting of the priorities into the different subcommittees and determine what the right number is. And on some boards and commissions I serve on, we're working to shrink the number to consolidate because, you know, as subcommittees tend to meet monthly or bi-monthly in between, and if people, if there are a large number of subcommittees, it can stretch resources or it can cause people to attend multiple meetings. One subcommittee that, if it turns out having appropriate composition of issues, I think would be great to have one centered on law enforcement. That was what led our discussion today. And one of the real strengths of the lethality assessment program is that it's as I understand it, a program meant to support law enforcement responses to domestic violence situations. And I think it could be a great subcommittee for building and reinforcing our law enforcement champions. And I think the more that we can demonstrate that the work that we're doing is meant not just to save lives of victims and survivors of people vulnerable to DV or family violence, it's also to support those that we are counting on to respond in those situations. It could have some real advantages to it. So I wanted to offer that up.
Yeah, thank you. Any other discussion? Senator Flexer.
Thank you. I guess I just add that looking forward to the work of the subcommittees, I think it will depend on the charge of each group, but as the subcommittees are beginning to work, I think there may have to be some more frequency of meetings depending on how things shake out. And if what you're looking at is something that needs to be a legislative change that will need to be introduced in February, that may end up being a body that needs to meet more frequently. We're going to give the subcommittees some flexibility that people won't have to come here and sit at a table like this to have those meetings every month. We'll work with the staff person and the people who step up to be members of those subcommittees to make sure that the meetings are accessible, maybe even some of them being online, so that it's a little bit less of a time-consuming exercise to be a part of the subcommittees, but there may be some that need to meet pretty frequently to try to get something concrete and something that can get the full endorsement of the full council moving forward into February.
Thank you, Senator Flexer. Any other discussion on the structure and reporting? Okay. All right. All right, moving on to other business. Anybody with any other business? It's our first meeting, so I'm not expecting a lot of other business. Senator Kissel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a generalized question, and maybe this is written somewhere and I'm just ignorant of it. Do we have a set schedule for when the council as a whole is meeting? Like when?
We are going to discuss that on.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Item.
Would help me if I actually read along. Sorry.
And I did just want to acknowledge that Nancy Turner is in attendance of the council meeting via Zoom. Nancy, did you want to contribute? Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, my apologies. We just finished the McDougal parole hearing, so I am sorry I'm not joining on in a more timely manner.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate that you're joining. All right, so moving on, Senator Kissel, you want to start this discussion? So we do need to discuss and set our meeting times and dates. This council is charged with meeting monthly. I don't know if this time and date or, a Wednesday at this time works for everybody. If it does, we would want to try to meet in person for the next several meetings. And then we are certainly open to moving hybrid over sort of that like winter time and into session, knowing that it may be difficult to get a room here. So we are looking to have a hybrid schedule, but wanted to just kind of confirm a time that works for everybody and a day of the week. Does this work for everybody? Yeah. Okay. So Wednesdays from, okay. So we're committed. We're committed to Wednesdays from 12:30 to 2.
Maybe clarify the last one.
The last Wednesday. Yep.
That
Last,
will avoid Thanksgiving in November. It will avoid the holiday week in
December
but it does set us up well
for the rest
for
of the
rest
year.
of the year.
So last Wednesday of the month, we will work to figure out November and December timeframes for individuals. So November the 29th should work out. And then the 27th, December 27th. So we'll work with all of you to figure out if that day
And
will work.
question, Madam Chair, you're saying the next meetings will be in person and then at some point we may morph into either a hybrid or
Yeah,
virtual.
I think for the first couple meetings, I do think we should meet in person. So maybe the first 3 to 4. Once it gets to February, I'm just less confident that we'll be able to get the space in this building with session. So I do think over the winter and springtime, we'll likely be meeting in a Zoom format and then could resume over the summer once session ends in May.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Does anybody else have anything else they wanted to contribute? Senator Flexer.
I just want to say with clarity that our next meeting will be Wednesday, November 29th at 12:30 in a room similar to this one, if not this one. And then we will definitively meet again on January 31st, 2024 at 12:30 as well. And we'll figure out what to do about December.
Yeah, we'll figure out December.
Because unless you want to have a bunch of toddlers running around on the 27th.
Yeah.
You'll have.
You'll at least have 3 of them. So between the co-chairs, you'll have three toddlers running around here. All right. Okay. If nothing else, then I think we move on to adjournment. Anything else before we adjourn? We're going to end early at 1:25. All right. We do need a motion to adjourn. So
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.